And welcome to today's edition of Dr. Carole's Couch. I'm your psychiatrist host, Dr. Carole Lieberman. Today is going to be a very interesting show. The title of it is Pope Fiction. What will Pope Leo XIV do? Is it good for the Christians, good for the Catholics? You know, that comes from the line that that there is it good for the Jews? I mean, as a Jew, that's what I always say. And people, generally Jewish people, say that often a lot when they're trying to figure out is some policy or some event, is it good for the Jews? So this question today is it good for the Catholics? And the perfect person to be answering that question is my guest, Reverend Jim Harden. He is a dedicated pro-life advocate and leader of CompassCare. He is known for his outspoken views on medical ethics, executive leadership, and pro-life strategy. With a family of 10 children, he walks his talk, and a strong moral compass, he believes in the adage, money follows morality. Harden has been vocal about perceived corruption in federal law enforcement and public policy in the post-Roe America. His predictions about the Dobbs decision in 2018 and the demise of the red wave in 2022 showcase his deep understanding of the political landscape. Okay. Well, today we're gonna primarily concentrate on the new pope, and I have my points of view about the new pope. Obviously, not with as much clerical background, but in my opinion, the Trump, the Pope, the Pope, the Pope may have TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, or at least the people who were voting on who the next Trump, I keep saying this, who the next Pope would be, is what have TDS. So let's begin. Welcome to the show, Reverend Harden. Uh,
Dr. Carole, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
you're welcome. Um, it's a very interesting. First of all, before we start and what you think about the new Pope, what did you think that the who did you think was going to become Pope? Who did you think was going to be chosen from the conclave that they had?
Well, I didn't know any names, but I had a hunch as to the type of person they might choose. And the reason why I had a hunch is I actually predicted it in my Newsmax column. They would choose a particular kind of man, and that man would follow Pope Francis's direction for reforming the church. And so the reason why I believe that is because Pope Francis was responsible for choosing 108 of the 133 cardinals responsible for replacing him. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, so that's a pretty big indicator. Pope Francis was a conflicted pope. Above all, he was a conflicted pope, and the reason I say that is because his his understanding of global problems, and his socialist, communist kind of affections to solve those problems conflicted with the church's moral teaching on many points. And so while he never attempted to change official church teaching, he pushed the limits in a pastoral way, meaning he's going to take a pastoral approach to the crisis of the Zika virus in South America. I don't remember. You remember that happening back in 2015, I think it was,
No,
2013.
I don't remember what that was about. What
So
was
there was a Zika virus scare, and the scare was that if a woman got the Zika virus in South America, it was a disease that was spread mosquito borne.
Oh, yes.
And if a woman got this disease, the fear was that it would cause uh, fetal anomalies and deformities if she's pregnant while she gets the disease. And so he, in an interview on an airplane back from South America, was asked what he thought women should do, and he said, "Well, there's always contraception. The lesser of two evils. You could always use contraception." Now, this coming from the leader of the largest one of the largest religions on earth that his official position is against contraception for the nuclear family. This was a bombshell that, again, pushing the pastoral limits. Now, he did this on other occasions too, with respect to same-sex marriage and blessing same-sex unions, with respect to the LGBTQ community, and kind of opening up dialogue with them, as well as abortion, believe it or not. Now, he was very, clear about his position that abortion is wrong and an evil, but he likened it, and this is not a lesser of two evils problem. In 2024, when asked about the presidential election choice of the voters in America, how would he encourage voters in America to vote, whether it's for Biden or for Trump? And he said, well, this is a difficult decision. You have to make a decision between somebody who is against the killing of preborn or unborn children, and again, for against somebody who is for kicking migrants out, illegal immigrants of the country. He said they're equivalent evils, which was a head scratcher for a lot of people. But
Wait a
if you look,
minute. Kicking migrants out is equivalent to,
killing a child in abortion.
okay.
That's what that was the equivalency that he made. And so that was the decision that was in front of us. And it was not a lesser of two evils. It was just two evils. How do you choose between two equal evils? And so this was what I'm saying. He believed that the immigration problem was related to an impending global disaster. Global biological extinction was what Pope Francis believed was coming, primarily because of over consumption of natural resources because of a growing human population. So you see the problem here? Humans are the problem, according to Pope Francis. And so it's creating immigration crises, and that's basically going to result in the demise of all of humanity. And so abortion is also bad. So what do you do with that? So he saw them both as killing. And so the new Pope Leo, was Pope Francis's right-hand man for several years. Most people don't know that, but he was working behind the scenes, architecting the new leadership in the church globally. He was what's called the prefect of the dicastery of bishops. That means that he was responsible for, helping the Pope identify and appoint or remove certain bishops in basically all the dioceses across the globe. So everybody knew who Robert Prevost was. Everybody. And within the workings and the machinery, the political machinery of the Catholic Church, Robert Prevost was very well known and knows how to navigate all that. Robert Prevost is also sympathetic to Pope Francis's kind of reform agenda. Vatican II was a big reform moment in the Catholic Church. Probably, not as big as the Protestant Reformation, but nevertheless, we're talking about the Pope Francis essentially leading the church up to a potential Vatican III. And Pope Leo, the new Pope, basically said he's going to take Pope Francis's ideas of leading the church into the kind of new era to the next level. And the way he said that was in his opening remarks when he was first announced as Pope. And he said the church will be a synodal church. That's what he said. The church will be a synodal church. And that's a big, for anybody in the know with respect to how the church governance works in the Catholic Church, that's a big flag that says, hey, we're going to move forward on democratizing power, decision-making power, all the way down to the laity. Okay. The Catholic Church has had synods on synodality for the last 2 years, which means that they're trying to figure out, how to change the inner workings and polity of the Catholic Church so that you have a consensus-based leadership instead of a single power structure coming from the Pope. This is interesting. He called himself Pope Leo, okay? It was his decision to call himself Pope Leo XIV. The first Pope Leo I in 440 AD was the one to actually consolidate power under the papacy. And now you got Pope Leo XIV looking to democratize it or decentralize power. Now, this is important.
So how do you explain that? I mean, why do you think he picked the name Pope Leo if it's like the opposite of what he wants to do?
Well, because he's going to need to be a lion in order to make it happen. Leo the lion. He's going to need to be much more involved in statecraft between nation states. The church is going to have to become more of a political player. They're going to have to be much more engaged in understanding the consensus of the population. They're going to be much more interested in, they're going to have to play politics. And so they're going to have to, rule by consensus, not by decree. And that means that they're going to have to be open to changing the moral teaching of the church.
Mm.
And that's what Pope Francis couldn't do. What Pope Francis could do was till the soil and get everybody ready for it pastorally. And now Pope Leo is going to come along and he's going to affect the change. Now, if I'm right, we're going to see Pope Leo continue the relationship that Pope Francis began with China. And the reason I say that is because the Sino-Vatican deal that not many people know about is a deal whereby the Vatican, signed a deal with the atheistic Chinese Communist Party to allow the Communist Party to assign bishops and appoint bishops in the Catholic Church, if you can believe it.
What?
And they did. Yeah, so that started, and so the first deal was signed in 2018. It was renewed every 2 years thereafter, and it was renewed again in 2024 by Pope Francis. Pope Francis has been heavily criticized for I should say, sensitivity, let's say, towards socialist communist ideologies in
Mm.
terms of solving, you know, um, population problems. The communists have been known for their heavy-handed kind of approach in managing populations. And you see that in China par excellence. Mao Zedong engaged the Cultural Revolution, whereby he fundamentally altered the expectations of family and child rearing with the
Mhm.
one-child policy. And
Right.
it was so thorough and so effective that now people don't want to get married in China and they don't want to have kids at all. And that's a problem for China because China is now, for the first time in the history of its existence, has been declining. The first time last year, they declined in population. Now, some think that they've been declining in population for the last several years, and China's been covering it up. But they're having economic crises to boot because their workforce is aging. So, um, you know, the Sino-Vatican deal, if Pope Leo continues the Sino-Vatican deal, that's a big pointer that, in fact, he is going to be moving toward
Uh-huh.
more of a church's role, a heavier church role in the geopolitics of the world as global politics shift. And this, by the way, is very disconcerting because the church has not been this heavily involved in the geopolitical climate since 1648 with the end of the Hundred Years' War and the Peace of Westphalia. So this is a very interesting time, history in the church, because I think that there's a massive shift going on just geopolitically as well as within the church doctrine. So Pope Leo, I think, is going to continue to, communicate his conservative church views on social issues like same-sex marriage, homosexuality, and abortion, possibly contraception. I'm not sure, but he's going to with the concept of synodality, he's going to have the ability to change church teaching based on moral consensus and collegiality. That's a word that's been thrown around. The collegial leadership is a word that's been used by, the Eastern Orthodox Church after they split off from the Catholic Church, primarily because of the primacy of the Pope. When Pope Leo actually, the first Pope Leo, consolidated power under himself. And so the Eastern Orthodox Church said, no, the leadership of the church is a collegiality of bishops. It's a college of bishops where we make decisions together. And the Catholic Church said, no, it's a Christ represented by one man, the Pope. So that's a very it's always been very controversial, but the Catholic Church, I think, is moving in a way that will allow the Pope to maintain his power while at the same time altering moral teaching to have more control and say over kind of the policies and politics of other nation states.
Wow. All that to say that that this that of course he has a lot of power, but I mean, a lot of people didn't like how things were going under Pope Francis, like some of
No.
these things that he just decided kind of willy-nilly. Um, and so, I'm still struck by, I didn't realize that, when did Pope Francis pick these cardinals who would elect the new pope? Was it very close to when he died?
Well, the Cardinals would age out. Cardinals typically become Cardinals after a long career as priests and bishops. And so by the time they reach the age of, by the time they get appointed a cardinal, they're usually in their 60s and 70s. Now, the Cardinals that were able to vote are only the Cardinals that are under the age of 80. And so uh, the
Why do
133 of them. And so, over the course of
why do you think they have that rule? Only the ones under 80.
because the cardinals in the room all have to be eligible to be a pope.
Mhm.
And they say that if they don't want to put a pope in there who's 80 or over because
Uh-huh.
his longevity is not going to be there. But they elected a man, Pope Leo, Robert Prevost, is relatively young for a pope.
Yes. But what
But what?
we're going to need to take a break in a minute, but the thing is, it just picking saying that the people who elect the pope have to be less than 80. Is that what you said?
Yes,
Why would the people who decide upon the Pope have to be left less than 80? Maybe the Pope would have to be less than 80. But I mean, you would think that the older people were, that the cardinals were, the more experience they have, the more better able they would be to decide who would be the best Pope.
I agree with you 100%, Carol, Dr. Carroll. I don't know the actual rationale behind limiting the electors to under 80. I think the rationale has to do with that those men in the room all have to be eligible to be pope. And
I
and
see.
that means that they can't be 80 or over.
I see. All right. Well, I guess this would be a good time to take a break. There's so much to talk about. It's very scary, even for people who aren't Catholic. Obviously, the
Oh,
Pope
yes.
has a lot of impact, not just on Catholics or Christians, but on the whole world.
Yes.
And so this is very worrisome, to be honest. All right. Well, we will come back with my guest, Reverend Jim Harden. We'll be talking about the Pope and is it Pope fiction? So stay tuned. You're listening to Dr. Carol's Couch, and I'm your psychiatrist host, Dr. Carole Lieberman. And welcome back to Dr. Carole's Couch. I'm your psychiatrist host, Dr. Carole Lieberman. We're talking today about Pope fiction. What will Pope Leo XIV do? Is it good for the Christians, good for the Catholics? And my guest today, Reverend Jim Harden, from some of the things he's been telling us, obviously the answer seems like no. During the break, Reverend Harden, you started to talk about the things that you were concerned about because I said I was concerned before I heard what you had to say in the first segment. Now I'm very concerned. So what are you concerned about in regard to Pope Leo?
Well, I have concerns, I mean, serious concerns, because the Catholic Church has been on the ground floor of protecting all people equally. They've been on the ground floor of protecting all people equally from fertilization to natural death, without qualification, without partiality. And they've been on the ground floor of protecting the nuclear family. And for me, I'm in the pro-life community. We provide free medical services, trying to help women who think that abortion is their only choice, and we try to give them everything that they need in order to have their baby. And um, we if we didn't have the Catholic Church, again, we'd be facing a massive. We're already facing an uphill battle, especially in New York State. We've got political bad actors that are coming after us. In the last 2 or 3 years, you had the Catholic Church ostensibly aligning itself with some of the policies of the Biden administration that was literally politicizing federal law enforcement to attack us. Okay, we were literally firebombed. This is literally firebombed by pro-abortion domestic terrorists in June of 2022.
Pro-abortion domestic.
Pro-abortion domestic terrorists.
Okay,
This is
yeah.
James Revenge. It's an Antifa front group. They attacked. They have their Marxist based group originally coming out of Russia, and they attacked over 500 different churches and pro-life organizations over the last 2.5 years. And federal we had the Biden administration that was complicit. Joe Biden himself signed an executive order directing then Merrick Garland, Attorney General, to initiate the Reproductive Health Task Force to look into, quote, the fraudulent practices of pregnancy centers. Now we're the victims, okay? We're not, but then now we're being treated like terrorists because we don't hold the political views of the party of power. Very dangerous moment, and a lot of that could be quelled or spoken against by the Catholic Church and by the powers that be, because the reason why pro-life people do what we do is because of our religion. It's because we believe that we're made in the image of God, that we believe all people are equally valuable without qualification. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, how old you are, how productive you think you might be, or other people might think how mentally fit or unfit you think you might be, or other people might think you are. All these things don't matter. What matters is the truth that we're endowed by our Creator, not our government, with certain unalienable rights. The first of which, the right upon which all the rights are predicated, is the right to life. And if you allow the government to say to dehumanize an entire category of person, I don't care who it is, it's a slippery slope. Because at that point, you're vesting the government with the power to determine which humans qualify for protection under the law and which ones do not. And then you've got no justice system. You've got no equality. It's all a farce. It's all just words that the politically powerful use to manipulate the masses to amass more power to themselves. That's what we were facing with the Biden administration. And if you've got a church like the Catholic Church that can stand up and support its people and say it's wrong for government to hold these policies, it's wrong for government to silence and to attack pro-life people because of their beliefs, or anybody for that matter, then you've got strength. You've got moral strength. You've got prophetic strength, if you will. But if the church is allowed to change its views, if the Catholic Church comes along and says, well, we're going to modify, we're going to moderate, we're going to moderate our views to mollify the masses, to create some consensus so that we can have more influence in nation state policy, then we're going to have big problems. And that's exactly what Pope Francis did in China. He created a deal with the Chinese Communist Party, and it created increased persecution for Chinese Catholics and Christians because of the deal, because the church could now step in and dictate leadership and how beliefs ought to be manifested in the public square or not. So we manifest our beliefs in the public square in America, right? And one of the ways we do that as Christians is through pro-life pregnancy centers.
Well, okay,
Now,
wait. Wait. It's going to. Um, First of all, I wanted to mention. Do you remember who Dr. Barnett Slepian was?
yes,
He was the doctor, the OBGYN in Albany, who was killed by people who were anti-abortion. And he and I went to medical school together.
did you really?
And yes. And he was a little older, but yes, he was such a wonderful man. And he went through so much to get through medical school. You know, his parents didn't have money, so he had to work his way through. And he just did that for so many years. And and so he finally got to be a doctor, and then he, became an OBGYN, and he was living in Albany or upstate New York, and then to be, killed he was shot through the window of his home, and killed, and that was just incredibly devastating. So I feel this on a personal level that,
Yes.
whatever kind of medicine a person chooses to practice. I mean, there are residency programs in OBGYN and all of that. It is a recognized field of medicine, although not all OBGYNs do abortions, but still, for him to have spent all these years working so hard to get to be a doctor and then to get the specialty, to be a specialist in OBGYN, and to have him shot down, he had a family. It was just devastating.
Yeah.
But now, um, I wanted to I wanted to get into some other aspects of the Pope. Um, Well, first of all, um, well, one thing is you besides the Chinese Communist Party, there was also concern that he was in favor of globalists, that he was basically a globalist plant. Um,
Well, that makes perfect sense. I mean, in 2015, he came out with his second encyclical. That is, Pope Francis came out with his second encyclical called Laudato Si, and in it, basically, he referred to the fact that, as he understood it, the globe was heading towards biological extinction. And then he hosted a Pontifical Academy of Science in 2017, and he gave the kind of megaphone of the Vatican to a population control man named Paul Ehrlich, and he wrote the book Population Bomb. I don't know if you remember that back in 1968. He wrote The Population Bomb, which created a tremendous amount of fear of overpopulation and global human extinction. And so he came to this, and he along with another researcher named Das Gupta, essentially said that, yep, global biological extinction is coming. It's impending. It can't be reversed due to overconsumption of natural resources because of overpopulation. And so the Pope believed that, and believed that we needed to make some serious changes in the way that humans had families, and the expectations for childbearing and child rearing. And he also was very believed in the role of secular kind of socialist government to enact those heavy-handed policies to force these changes. Now, whether or not he wanted to change official teaching around the nuclear family and reproductive childbearing, etc., wasn't clear. But he was definitely heading toward kind of a globalist approach to saving the irreducible whole of human society. That's what he called it, the irreducible whole of human society. Now that's a change in course in terms of the way the Catholic Church viewed the basic unit of society. The basic unit of society was not the individual. It was not the irreducible whole of all of humanity. It was the family. It was the nuclear family. So that was also a departure from official Catholic teaching. and it also lended itself towards a globalist kind of model for dismantling the nation state system. And by the way, that is a communist goal, to dismantle the current nation state system as it was established in the Westphalian Treaty in 1648 to pave the way for a global communism.
And
So
so yes, I mean, so it's so interesting how these things are sort of merging because you have the globalists and the communists thinking that, that we have to, that there's going to be overpopulation, and we
yep,
have to, that's our number one thing, kind of like related to global warming too. We're using, there are too many of us basically. That's why we're destroying the planet and we're going to destroy ourselves. And so obviously, if the Catholic Church and the popes had been for had been against abortion. Well, wait, what am I saying? Yes. Let me get it clear. Um, if you are for abortion, then that would help to keep the population smaller.
correct.
So they would need to be against abortion to to
In order to maintain continuity in the membership of your church, especially in the more conservative areas of the world, like South America, Africa, etc., you're going to need to maintain those kind of legacy moral teachings of the church about the nature of how human beings ought to react, and how what human beings ought to do in terms of their relationships with the opposite sex and child rearing. So the way in which you can control the nation, the global population, is through things like undermining the nuclear family. And then you can
right.
do that. You can do that through sterile relationships, same-sex marriages, encouraging sterility, encouraging contraception, encouraging abortion, things of that nature. But in order to do that, you have to create some underlying fear, right? You have
Uh,
to create some problem that the church has to participate in solving in order to
right,
save humanity, not
right,
just
right,
the individual.
right.
And so that's exactly what's happening. And so I think you're going to find um, the Catholic Church is going to come out and say things like, now I don't know this for sure. I'm just guessing here based on the trajectory, that the Catholic Church could eventually say things like physician assisted suicide may be could be a good, or could be a lesser of two evils. We don't want to allow people to continue to take up unnecessary resources if the doctors are saying they're going to die anyway. So let's just end it now and save some of these precious resources for the generation that's coming up.
That is the
Same,
slippery slope that this could all go to.
Oh, it's very slippery slope. That's exactly the direction that you're headed with these kinds of policies. Same thing with euthanasia. Um, people have to be very careful. I think it's feasible that you can twist Christian theology to say, look, Christ engaged in euthanasia. He made a decision to end his life, for the good of humanity, right? And so sometimes we have to make those decisions on behalf of other people for the good of humanity, for the good of the family. You're just an extra burden, these kinds of things. And so we lose sight of the sacrosanct nature of humanity. I say this a lot. There's only two things that are sacred in this world. It's God and people. And I use the word things in a loose way. There's only two things that are sacred: God and people. And when we start to treat humanity like something to be managed, then we dehumanize entire populations, and we're able to justify or legalize the killing or destruction of entire classes of humanity. Very dangerous waters, because now you're going to invest a small group of people with the power of absolute power, the power over life and death. And that's something I don't think any human being should be vested with.
So okay, so let me try to so so you are pro-life, you are against abortion, but I thought that CompassCare, maybe I misunderstood, but I thought CompassCare helped people to get abortions.
Now
From
we
what I
provide. So when a woman faces an unplanned pregnancy, she uh, feels like abortion is her only choice. And so we provide information about abortion, about all the different types of abortion procedures, certain risks and side effects. Um, if she starts the chemical abortion process, we can help her understand what that is, and we can, if she changes her mind, we can help reverse the effects of chemical abortion. These kinds of things. Um, abortion is not. So we're in New York, and there's no shortage of abortion in New York. It's the abortion capital of the United States. And in the New York City metro region, for example, we've got offices in Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Staten Island. We've got offices in Buffalo and Rochester and Albany. But we're wildly outnumbered. I mean, there's 80, for example, 87 abortionists in the New York City metro area, and there's only three pro-life medical alternatives. And these are the biggest abortion kind of hubs, and women, underserved populations, and the Black population, the Hispanic population, et cetera. They don't have anywhere else to go. So we provide all of our services for free. Women would normally have the children if they just felt supported, and that's what we're seeing. We're trying to. And I remember having a conversation with an abortion doctor just around the corner from here. And we were talking about why are women getting abortions? What is he seeing, et cetera? And he's saying, his idea was I've got to provide these abortions because someone's got to do it. These women need this service. Right. And I said, well, what if you refer them all to us first, and we could weed them out. We could figure out which ones actually want to have abortions, which ones really would have the baby if they're given enough support. Because if I could guarantee you that I can give them all the support that they need, right? If I could just guarantee, because we do everything, we'll do everything. We'll help her with medical insurance. We'll help her with if she wants to place a child for adoption. If she wants to parent the child, we'll provide. You name it. And so anyway, I gave him a lot to think about. In fact, my father ran hospitals in Chicago and Milwaukee, and one of his friends was a renowned abortionist named Neville Sender. In fact, that was my mom's OBGYN. And he actually delivered me. His name was on my birth certificate. Neville Sender. Yeah, he was back in the 70s and 80s, very public figure. And same kind of thing. He worked at my dad's hospital, and we're just trying to, there's reasons why some of these abortionists do what they do, with respect to attempting. So in their mind, it's a form of compassion, and in my mind, look, we've got to sacrifice in a coordinated effort to be radically responsible for our neighbor. It's not right that a woman should feel like she has to make a choice between her life and her baby's life, and that's what women are dealing with every single day, all across this country, and so anyway, that's where we're coming from.
That's interesting because I obviously I read something about CompassCare, and I took a different. All right, but now you cleared that up. And actually, when we come back, we're going to talk about we'll talk a little bit about Trump and his views, which I don't think are 100% formed yet, really. But I mean, on his views on abortion. He has lots of very formed views. I was at his inauguration. He signed all kinds of executive orders, and since then, I am very pro-Trump, as you might have guessed, and you have some special connection to him in regard to making these decisions about, being pro-life or not. So when we come back, we'll talk about that, and also, whether Trump derangement syndrome had a role in this particular Pope being chosen. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. You're listening to Dr. Carole's Couch, and stay tuned. And welcome back to Dr. Carol's Couch. Today we're having an incredibly interesting discussion. It's a little confusing because you don't know, because the things that you assume aren't necessarily, everything has been turned around in our world. Our world has been put on its head upside down in so many different ways, and including the abortion and pro-life and all of that. We're talking about this in relation to the Pope, Pope fiction we're talking about, and my guest is Reverend Jim Harden, and he is a pro-life advocate and leader of CompassCare. Now, just to kind of try to tie a little bow, because I'll admit my head was spinning too, hearing some of these things about, the Pope like being in bed with, so to speak, with the Chinese Communist Party, um, and so on. And with this Pope, Pope Leo the XIV, who Robert Prevost was his name before becoming Pope, so the way it basically, just to sort of kind of tie things, make things a little simpler, tie things up, what we've been talking about, is that I mean, it has been forever that the church and of course, the Pope, the Catholic Church and the Pope have been associated with being pro-life, not having abortions. So, so it is very strange now that some Pope Francis and now Robert Prevost, the new Pope Leo the XIV, since they have become bedfellows, I gotta say it, with Chinese Communist Party, and with the globalists who want the opposite, who are afraid that they want abortions because they don't want so many people. They want people to die or to be aborted or however you can get rid of them. They want fewer people in the world because they believe that too many people, we're not going to have enough resources if we keep breeding at this rate, even though a lot of countries are very concerned. I mean, we heard Reverend Harden talking about China. It used to be that China had this rule that, or the Communist Party had this rule, which is essentially they rule what happens in China, that you could only have one child. And it was kind of interesting that the Chinese always hoped to have, if they only could have one child, they wanted to have a boy because they wanted the boy to be able to help with the farming and any other kind of work. And so it was always a disappointment if they had girls. And did they abort girls?
Yes.
Yes, I thought that was.
So the China has a disproportionate male to female ratio. There's 117 boys for every 100 girls born. And that means that there's been gender selection abortion. Now, China made it illegal to do gender selection abortion, but they were still doing it anyway. So they made it illegal for ultrasonographers to actually reveal the gender of the child to the parents when they were doing prenatal care. So, but still, it happened, and it likely is still going on today. We know what's going on in the U.S. We know what's going on in India, places like that, where if a couple only wants to have one child and they prefer a particular agenda, then or prefer a particular gender, then they'll abort the opposite gender. Very difficult, very unethical reality that we're facing. But the Catholic Church is, in fact, attempting to solve a problem that they believe, is happening globally, and that is a problem for the salvation of humanity. And so that's going to have special, perhaps dispensations, if you will, for their moral teaching about the nuclear family, about contraception, about abortion, about in vitro fertilization, about surrogacy, about all these things that relate to reproductive health and human growth and human interaction with government affairs. And so that's one of the reasons why I think the Pope Leo mentioned how he was very interested in going out into the world. For the Catholic Church to represent 1.4 billion people on the planet, to go out into the world has policy ramifications. What
Yeah.
that means is the Pope is going to become Pope Francis 2.0. And he is going to get more and more involved in the geopolitical policy setting as the power structures in the world begin to shift and shake. Especially when you've got population dynamics happening with respect to growth in certain areas and decline in other areas. Like, for example, decline in population in Europe and Asia, with growth in populations in South America and Africa. You're going to have change in nation state influence, like the US or China or Russia. If you just cannot actually center political power in a nation that's declining. You just can't do it. So they're
Well,
going to have to find a way to have a place at the table of power and shift the power away from its current base and make sure that they've got a voice there at the table.
well, in some ways, it seems like it's the very opposite of what someone, a priest or a pastor or, even a rabbi, it's not about changing the rules. It's about holding to the teachings. You're bringing down the teachings from Jesus or from Moses or somebody, and that is who you represent. Now, the new Pope, I mean, Pope Francis, who obviously, put a fix in for Pope Leo, um, he, they will have to because they want to align themselves with globalists and with communists and all of that, and we know that communists and Marxists and socialists um, want to destroy the unit of the family because
Mhm.
that's how they are able to have more power. The
Yes.
government is able to have more power if they
Yeah.
destroy the family unit.
Yep.
So if Pope Leo wants to, be a friend, be aligned with these, the globalists and the communists and the Marxists and all of those people, um, he is going to have to find a way. He's sort of caught in the middle of what the traditions are of the Catholic Church, which is anti-abortion, um, and respecting all lives, like you were talking about. And he's going to have to find a way to somehow explain, that that what he wants to have happen, the political aspects that he wants to have happen, and this whole idea of decreasing the population. Now,
Yep.
it's interesting because, like you were explaining, that his idea is to not have the Pope be the sole power, but to have it be by consensus. So
Mhm.
it seems to me that that could be the way that he's going to try to hide or get out of the fact that there are he's making this big change from what the church stood for. Well, it's not my fault, folks. That's what they want.
Yeah, that's definitely a real possibility. There is also the possibility of having a special dispensation for a crisis event, and they could paint the current global scenario as a crisis, and then have special dispensations to exempt people from engaging in or the church from teaching traditional social teachings around the nuclear family. It's funny because they're going to have to embrace the secular view of the basic unit of society as the individual and promote individual autonomy. And it's funny because if you look at President Trump, he made a little meme. Somebody in the White House made a meme about, after Pope Francis died, people were very upset about it because they dressed Trump up in this,
Yes.
AI generated papal garb. Remember this?
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes, absolutely.
it's funny because the President Trump is engaging in rhetoric and policy setting that is trying to reinforce the nuclear family and dismantle the secular autonomous individualism that our nation has been promoting for many for at least 4 generations. So, moving away from same-sex marriage and moving away from LGBTQ policies and DEI and trying to encourage people to have families and giving a $5,000 bonus to a woman who has a
Yes.
child and all
Yes.
these kinds of
Yes.
things. He's actually taking more of a papal position based
Yes.
on the original, definitions of what it means to be the irreducible nature of humanity being the nuclear family. So I don't, it is kind of ironic. I mean, because President Trump is not particularly religious, I don't think.
Well,
Although,
but wait a second, but he's really bringing religion back. That's one of the things that he's doing.
and he has to.
Um,
He
and
must.
like at his inauguration, it was very religious,
Oh, yes.
all different kinds of religion, but he made it much more religious than usual.
And
We're kind of going to be running out of time, and I
right.
just wanted you to have a chance to say something about in the last 2 minutes, about your influence over President Trump in regard to this issue.
Well, I don't know how much influence I had over President Trump, other than the fact that I've come up with some ideas that his administration has seemed to, you know, uh, run with. And one of them, I've been the first to say certain things. One of those things was during the campaign for presidency. He was toying with the concept of having a federal ban on abortion, like say 15 weeks or whatever. And I, in my Newsmax column, said, no, you should really back off on that. You really should not have. It's the purview of the states to regulate the abortion procedure. It's the purview of the federal government to protect all people. I wouldn't even go there. I would just enforce the law as it exists. And within a week and a half, he was saying just that.
Mhm.
And so he backed way off. Everybody thought he wasn't pro-life anymore. He was hedging his bets. That's not what he
Uh-huh.
was doing. And so now we've got a president that's probably, again, more pro-life in his policies and his actions than even Ronald Reagan. I'm very happy to see that, and I'm happy to continue to speak into the presidency as best I can with respect to any policies that might need to be done. And I've created many different policy concepts and plans. I think 6 or 7 of them, and many of those ideas have been picked up as well. But you can see them all at my website at compasscarecommunity.com.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah, it's compasscarecommunity.com.
Okay, very good. Well, this has been a very interesting discussion. Um, and I'm glad that you're having this influence. I mean, you're not saying that, and Trump certainly isn't saying that he's going to try to make abortion illegal
No,
again.
no,
But so it's just to have the proper balance that people can decide for themselves based on their situation, and your organization tries to help them make that decision more fully, or more easily, based upon your offering to provide support.
yes.
So, Reverend Jim Harden, thank you so much for being a guest on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Dr. Carole. It's been an honor.
And thank you all for listening. You've been listening to Dr. Carol's Couch. And I'll be happy to chat with you next week when we will have another interesting guest. Or maybe I'll do a show myself. Again, I haven't done one in a while, railing at the news because there's so much to rail at. Okay, thank you for listening.